Hello my awesome friends, welcome back to my channel. As always, I am so excited to have you back here again for a new episode. And if you are new here, hello and welcome. Why don't you stick around to see what kind of shocking true crime story I have for you today. And of course, please do subscribe to the channel. Now, before I get into the story, I have to give out a channel disclaimer, and that is my channel is not meant to show any disrespect to the victims or the families of the victims that I talk about in these videos. The information that I share with my audience is simply just research taken from different sources of the internet and compiled into one video. And the main purpose of my channel is for educational and awareness purposes of the different types of crimes we face on a daily basis. And the content warning is that in this case, I will be talking about murder, and I will also be touching a little bit on mental health. So if you are sensitive to that kind of content, then viewer discretion is very much advised. Okay guys, I hope everything is good on your side and that you are ready for today's episode. Also, before I get into it, I just wanted to say that if you don't see me uploading the second episode of this week during the weekend, then please do forgive me for that, because I've got a pretty busy weekend coming up. So if I don't see you this weekend, then I will have to see you again next week. But for now, sit back, relax, and let me tell you all about the unbelievable case of Taliep Petersen. Taliep Petersen was born on April 15th in 1950, and he was a well-known South African singer, composer, and also a director of a lot of popular musicals. And he also won an Oliver Award after working with David Kramer, who is also a well-known South African singer, songwriter, playwright, and director. Taliep was born in a multicultural neighborhood in Cape Town District 6, and the first time he ever performed for anyone was when he was 6 years old, when he performed at the Coon Carnival. Then his first ever theater performance was back in 1974 when he took part in the musical performance of Hair, and after that he took part in the Godspell and also a musical opera known as Jesus Christ Superstar. In the 80s, Taliep formed a band called Sapphire, and the focus of the band was on playing the interpretations of the traditional Cape Malay music. Then in 1986, he worked with David Kramer again, and they collaborated on a musical called District 6 the Musical. And this explored the culture and history of the colored community in Cape Town. And it actually became the first of many that would come after it, because Taliep was just a culture-orientated person and he loved focusing and bringing awareness to it. In 1999, Taliep and David actually won the Best New Musical Oliver Award, and they also shared the Best Actor Musical Award. So by now you should be able to tell that Taliep Petersen was quite a well-known and quite an accomplished artist in South Africa. Taliep met his first wife, Madiga Anders, on his award-winning musical District 6 when she was cast there in 1987. They ended up hitting things off, and then they dated for over a decade before Madiga decided to retire from dancing, and then she decided to convert to Taliep's religion of Islam so they could get married and then live their life together. Together, Taliep and Madiga had 4 kids, 3 daughters, Yawir, Aisha, and Fatima, and they also had 1 son by the name of Asher. However, even though as the years were going by, Taliep's career was flourishing, his marriage to Madiga, however, ended up taking some very rough patches. And because of that, and because of a lot of complications, in 1997, they decided to get a divorce. Then shortly after Taliep and Madiga went their separate ways, Taliep remarried a woman by the name of Najwa Dirk, who came from a wealthy family of fruit distributors and had 2 kids of her own from a previous marriage. So she and Taliep discovered some chemistry between them, and then they ended up getting close, and then they got married. And it turns out that actually Najwa was Madiga's best friend while she was married to Taliep. But it also turns out that she admired Taliep from a distance while they were still married. And after Najwa and Taliep got married, in 1999 they had their own daughter by the name of Zainab. So like I said, in 1997, Taliep and Madiga got a divorce. So after that, Taliep moved out of the house and he moved in a house in Eflon, which was owned by Najwa's family. Taliep and Madiga had a custody arrangement that during the 2 weeks of the month, the kids would spend some time with their father, and then during the other 2 weeks of the month, they would spend some time with their mother. So Taliep and Madiga didn't really have a lot of contact with one another after they got divorced. Now, Taliep and Najwa actually got married 3 times. 2 of the occasions were more traditional ceremonies, and then the third occasion was them getting married under law. And apparently for the 2 traditional ceremonies, none of Taliep's family members were invited to attend, and Najwa didn't want to take on Taliep's family name. But even though some documents did show that she was Najwa Petersen, whenever she would introduce herself to people or in a meeting or in a business deal, she would always introduce herself as Najwa Dirk. Now, after their daughter Zainab was born in 1999, Taliep was completely happy about this. He was very excited to be a father once again. But after this, Najwa started having some odd behavior, and she ended up being diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and she suffered from depression. And because of that, she was in and out of mental institutions. Then in 2003, Najwa attempted to take her own life by overdosing on her own pills. But luckily enough, she was unsuccessful in doing that. And then after that incident, Taliep became in charge of her entire medication and making sure that she got the right type of dosage. And whenever he was out of the country on a business deal or whenever he was not in the house, his kids would be the ones in charge of making sure that the medication was locked away in a proper place where Najwa wouldn't take it to try to attempt to take her own life again. These mental conditions ended up having quite a bit of an effect on Taliep and Najwa's marriage. And then sometime in 2005, Taliep and his ex-wife Madiga ended up talking again. They would text and call each other as often as they possibly could. And then in early of 2006, Najwa fell into a deep state of depression once again, and then she was booked back into a mental hospital, and then she was only released on April 13th in 2006. Then on the night of that very same day, one of Taliep's daughters, Yawir, went over to the house to go and see them, and then she found her stepmother in the bedroom while her dad was in the shower. So she went on to go talk to her, and everything seemed fine. They were even talking about their plans for Taliep's birthday, which was about 2 days away on April 15th in 2006. And then later on, everyone went to bed. But then within just an hour, Yawir had a knock on her door, and it was her little sister, and she told her that her dad needed some help. And so they both went on to their dad's room, and when they got there, it was still dark and the lights hadn't been turned on. And so she was asking her dad what happened, and then he told her to turn the light on. And when she did, she saw her dad lying in a pool of blood, and she also saw her stepmother Najwa kneeling down on the floor with a knife in her hand. Yawir said one of the things that terrified her the most was the demonic look in her stepmother's eyes, because she had never seen her like that before. And after this, other family members got called over to see what was happening, and then the knife was taken away from Najwa, and then it was given to the family's domestic worker, and she was given the instruction to clean it up and put it away carefully. Then as everything was happening like this, Taliep made sure to take his wife back to the mental hospital where she could be treated once again, and she was put in there for 3 weeks. But then after this, everything became different in the house. As a matter of fact, Taliep's kids no longer felt safe whenever they came to sleep over if Najwa was around. They would sleep in their bedrooms with their doors locked, and everyone else also did the same thing. As a matter of fact, Taliep also slept in a different room that he would also leave locked whenever he goes to bed. So you could tell that no one no longer felt safe after Najwa stabbed her husband. Now, like I said, Najwa came from a well-off family that owned a successful fruit distribution business, and Najwa received up to 100,000 rand every month from the business proceeds, and also from the shares that she had in a property business, and also from her own work of arranging diamond sales. And even though she had all this money coming her way every month, she still had control over Taliep's finances. Basically, Taliep's money was not his own, and even the money that he would get from all his musicals and his appearances would all go straight to Najwa's bank account. And in Taliep's bank account would only be the money that he would need to pay his life insurance premiums. Taliep had quite a few life insurance policies that he took out on his children from his previous marriage. And then he also had a life insurance policy taken out on his daughter Zainab, and it was worth 5.3 million rand. And Taliep's will instructed that should he die, the money will be handled by Najwa until Zainab became of age. Sometime during the school year, Najwa ran into a friend of hers that she had known for over 20 years. And this was a man by the name of Fahim Hendricks, and they bumped into each other at Zainab's school because it turns out that Fahim's child also attended the same school. Now at this time, Fahim was in the planning phase of his takeaway business that he wanted to open up. But to do that, he needed money to get it off the ground, and he needed about 10,000 rand. So he started asking Najwa for a loan in order for him to be able to do this. And apparently this wasn't the first time that Fahim Hendricks had borrowed money from Najwa Dirk. Earlier on in the year, Fahim borrowed 20,000 rand from Najwa, and he used his own car as collateral. Then once he paid off the money, that's when he got back his car. But then when he went to borrow more money again in November of 2006, this time Najwa told him that she would only give him the money if he did something for her. She then told him that she wanted him to help her kill someone. At first, according to Fahim, he was a bit hesitant about accepting this deal, but then Najwa became more persistent about it until he eventually agreed. And then she told him that she would give him 100,000 rand that he would share with anyone that he could employ to do this job with him. Fahim went to a man by the name of Abdur MG, who actually lived with Fahim and his wife after he had just gotten released from prison. Abdur told Fahim that there were 3 guys he knew in Hanover Park who would be able to carry out this kind of job without any problem as long as the price is right. Then a few days went by without Najwa hearing a single word from Fahim, so she ended up getting impatient, so she sent a friend of hers to Fahim's house to get his contact details so they could talk about this deal. Then after that, Fahim and Abdur went over to Najwa's house to talk more about this whole thing. And this is when Najwa told them that the target was her husband Taliep Petersen. Now, according to Najwa, Taliep was planning on divorcing her. And if that happened, that meant he would get half of everything that she owned, so she was not about to have that happening to her. So the plan was, she wanted to make her husband's murder look like a robbery gone wrong. And she also told these men that she would have about 30,000 rand waiting for them on the scene that they would take and consider that as their deposit. And then she would pay the rest of the money when she gets the life insurance payout. Now during this time, Taliep was out of the country. He was in London for one of his musicals, and he was only going to come back on December 13th. And the plan was, Najwa was going to go pick him up at the airport, and then when she did that, that's when the men would ambush them and then rob them and then kill Taliep in the process. But then when the time came for Taliep to come back to South Africa, his flight ended up being delayed. And then Najwa told Fahim about this, and he told her that it's fine because apparently the 3 guys that they were going to hire to do this job didn't show up in the first place, so they could wait a little bit more. Then on December 14th, Taliep was planning to do a performance at a theater with his son Asher, and he was quite happy about this because he had been wanting to perform with his son for a very long time. So Najwa thought this would be the perfect opportunity to get him killed at the theater after his performance. So she called Fahim to tell him about this, but again, the 3 guys that had to come and do the job didn't show up once again. And so the second attempt on Taliep's life had failed. Then on December 16th in 2006, it was the birthday of Najwa's twin nieces, but she ended up not going to the celebration with the rest of her family because she said she wasn't feeling well, so she stayed behind at the house. Then at around 10 p.m. that night, Taliep went back home because he started feeling tired. Then when Taliep Petersen got back to his house, he and Najwa's cousin, who also lived on the property with them, ended up having a chat downstairs while they were having some tea and cake. And then after a little while, Najwa also decided to join them, and she was also having some tea and cake. But then she ended up going back upstairs, saying that she was going to go have a bath and then go to bed. She then waited for Taliep to get into his room and then watch TV as he did every night. And that is exactly what Taliep did. And knowing this, Najwa told Fahim and Abdur about Taliep's nightly habit of either being in a studio or watching TV in his room before he goes to sleep. And this time around, Fahim, Abdur, and Najwa decided to leave out those 3 guys that they were going to hire because now they saw that those guys were not as reliable as they thought they were. And this time they decided to enlist the help of a man by the name of Walid Hassan. And then Walid took one of his employees, a man by the name of Jefferson Snyders, and they decided to go and drive around Taliep's neighborhood to get the lay of the land and then look at the entry points that they could use to get into the property. So they wanted to make sure that everything was planned accordingly so they could be able to carry out the hit on that night. And they were told that the security door would be left unlocked, the alarm system would be turned off, as well as the security cameras, and also the sliding door would be left slightly open so they could have an easy access into the house. And since one of Najwa's sons was still at the birthday party that they had for Najwa's twin nieces, Taliep couldn't turn on the alarm system when he went to bed because he knew that the alarm would go off once Najwa's son came back from the party. The family also had a rule that the alarm system would be turned on by the last person to go to bed, and since Najwa's son was still out, it meant that it had to be left turned off until he came back, and then he could turn it back on when he goes to bed. Then at around 11:30 p.m., Najwa made a call to Fahim Hendricks, and then just 10 minutes later, around 11:40 p.m., the men broke into Taliep's bedroom while he was still watching TV. Jefferson Snyders had some cable ties that he was going to use to tie up Taliep with, but his partner Walid Hassan had a gun on him. They tied up Taliep and threw him to the floor. Then his wife Najwa came into the room and acted like she had no idea what was happening. But somehow Taliep already knew that Najwa had something to do with this, so when she tried to go and comfort him on the floor, he ended up headbutting her so hard that she fell on the floor. Then Walid Hassan punched Taliep in the face so hard after that blood started coming out of his nose and out of his mouth. They also decided to tie up Taliep's feet with the cable so they could stop him from moving around so much. And after this, Walid demanded that Najwa take him to where the family safe was, and inside the safe was actually 27,000 rand inside of a bag that Najwa had put in so the men could take it after they robbed and killed Taliep. But then when they got to the safe, Walid wanted to take some other items as well to make the robbery look more convincing, but Najwa didn't want to let that happen, so she only gave him her watch. Then Walid wanted to know if there was anyone else in the house, and then Najwa told him that it was her son and his wife as well as their baby. So Walid told her to take him to their room, and when they got there, he robbed them of 2,000 rand that they had on them, and then he also took a camera that they had in the room. And for some reason, Najwa started crying hysterically when things were happening like this. And in my opinion, I think she was just trying to make sure that everyone sees her as part of the victims of this robbery. Now, once Walid Hassan was done robbing Najwa's son and his wife, he locked them in their room and then decided to go back to Taliep's bedroom. So now that they had robbed the family, Najwa told Walid Hassan that it was time for them to do what they came there to do, which was of course to take Taliep Petersen's life. So after this, Walid took a pillow and then he folded it so he could put his gun inside of it between the folded parts. Then according to Walid, he said that he actually hesitated to shoot Taliep, but in that moment of hesitation, Najwa ended up putting her hand inside the pillow where the gun was, and then she pulled the trigger and shot her husband. But again, this was entirely according to this man, so we could never really know if what he said was actually the truth. And just like that, Taliep Petersen died almost instantly from a single gunshot wound. And then after this, Najwa instructed the men to lock her inside the room with her 7-year-old daughter Zainab. And then she gave them a few more minutes to get away before she started calling her family members to tell them about what happened to Taliep. Taliep's younger brother, who lived not that far away from them, was the first one to arrive at the scene. And when he got to the house, he came across the lifeless body of his older brother. And once the police finally arrived, Najwa was seen shaking and crying uncontrollably, so much that they had to give her a sedative before she could be interviewed by any of the investigators. Then, just 24 hours later, the family followed their Islamic tradition and buried Taliep in a traditional manner. Then on the very same day of Taliep's burial, Fahim went over to the house to go and see Najwa. And according to their tradition, a mourning Muslim woman was not allowed to see a man who was not a part of her family. So the family denied Fahim access to Najwa, but she ended up having him allowed into the property because she told him that they had to talk about the money that he owed her. But as you know by now, the only person who got money out of that meeting was Fahim Hendricks, when Najwa gave him about 40,000 rand for the job that they did. And then 6 months came and went, and investigators were actually feeling the pressure to solve Taliep Petersen's murder, because like I said, Taliep was a well-known and respected South African singer. He was a respected public figure as well. So of course the public wanted to have the people who took his life brought to justice. Then as the investigation was still underway, investigators discovered the one thing that seemed a little bit odd about Najwa Dirk from the night of the murder, and that was the fact that she still had her 2 phones on her after the robbery. And what seemed strange about this was the fact that everyone else in the house had their phones taken by the intruders. So why would they leave her with her 2 phones still on her? So that seemed quite suspicious to the investigators. So then her phones were taken in as evidence on the night of Taliep's murder. But she was a little bit reluctant to give them over to the investigators. But then eventually she ended up saying to investigators that she needed a few minutes to write down a few numbers so she can call some people about Taliep's funeral and make the necessary arrangements. But it turned out that she wasn't going to write down any numbers. As a matter of fact, she was actually trying to delete any form of contact with her friend Fahim Hendricks. But as you would know by now, that was completely pointless, because investigators have a way of finding even deleted evidence on someone's phone. And they ended up finding out that Najwa called Fahim Hendricks over 51 times in just a matter of a few days before and after Taliep Petersen was killed. But Fahim tried to play this off by saying that he and Najwa were actually in a secret relationship. But of course, the investigators didn't believe this one bit. And as a matter of fact, they decided to arrest him for being in possession of an illegal gun. And they did this as some sort of a tactic to put him under pressure, because they saw him as the weakest link of the entire operation. So they thought by putting him in custody, he would finally get to confess. Then once Fahim was released on bail, he decided to talk with his lawyer, and then he told his lawyer that he had some information on the murder of Taliep Petersen. And then his lawyer advised him to come clean about this, because if he ever got arrested again, this time he would need 20,000 rand to pay out his bail. And that was the kind of money that Fahim Hendricks didn't have at that time. So Fahim then went back to Najwa to tell her that if he ever got arrested, he needs to be able to pay out the bail as soon as possible, so they don't give the police enough time to put him under pressure. So just like that, Najwa decided to give the man 20,000 rand as a contingency plan. But then in June of 2007, Taliep ended up going to the police 6 months after Taliep was murdered, and he told the truth about everything that happened. And he ended up being given immunity so he wouldn't be prosecuted for this. And then just a few days later, Najwa, Dirk, Walid Hassan, Jefferson Snyders, and Abdur MG were arrested for the murder of Taliep Petersen. And they were also arrested on charges of robbery and being in possession of an illegal gun. But they all pleaded not guilty to all the charges that were laid against them. When Najwa was questioned about the 51 phone calls that she made to Fahim, she said that she was only trying to remind him about the money that he had owed her, because to her, money is very important. But when a number of witnesses testified against Najwa, they said that when they owed her money, she never called them 51 times to remind them that they owed her, so they had no idea what she was talking about. And then when she was also questioned about stabbing her husband, she said that since everyone said that's what happened, she doesn't deny it, but she also doesn't remember ever stabbing him at all. During the sentencing, the judge commented that Najwa wanted to play things off as a weak and mentally unstable woman, but in actuality, she was a manipulating person who wanted to have the upper hand on her husband, which was very evident on how she always wanted to be financially superior to him and how she always wanted to be controlling and have power over him. And then when further psychological assessments were done on her, psychologists couldn't really find any viable sign that she was right to be diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So this was also added to her list of tactics that she used to manipulate her husband. But at the end of it all, Najwa Dirk was found guilty of all charges laid against her, and she was sentenced to 28 years in prison. Walid Hassan and Abdur MG was sentenced to 24 years in prison, and then Jefferson Snijders was sentenced to 10 years for his involvement in the crime. But yeah guys, that was the story of Taliep Petersen. I am so terribly sorry to his children and the rest of his family for losing him in such a cruel way. But I also hope that his kids know that their father's legacy will live on through them and how they remember him. And here on my channel, we also hope that Taliep Petersen is resting in peace, knowing that justice was served in his name. And that is all that I have for you guys on this case. If you have any thought about it, please let me know in the comments. And also, if you enjoyed the episode, please leave it a thumbs up by pressing the like button, because that would seriously help me out. And also, thank you guys for chilling with me again. You know, taking the time out of your day to support my content really means the absolute world to me, and I could never do this without you guys. And if you are new here, please be part of the family and subscribe to the channel for more true crime content. That being said, I will see you guys in the next episode. So until then, enjoy the rest of your day, take care of yourselves, and cheers.